My name is Raviv, and today we're going to talk a little bit about using a different approach of hooking the PRNG functions in order to recover ransomware files, a full decryption, and the keys are on the way. So before I start, I'll just give a minute about myself. So my name is Raviv. I'm reverse engineering malware for almost a decade now. I think it's not only my profession, it's my hobby. Started at CTFs, I guess as a lot of us here did. And since then I'm hunting malware and reverse engineering them and CTFs. My backstreet was from the Technion in Israel. I'm Israeli. MBA from Tel Aviv University and George Washington. And throughout the years, I also had the privilege to be the head of a cyber security R&D unit, actually the National Lab for Malware Research in the MOD of Israel. Now, over the past year, I'm doing it independently, just a cybersecurity consultant for cybersecurity companies, basically in the fields of reverse engineering, malware research, cloud research, and IR, where my passion truly lies in this solution of ransomware, finding a solution to ransomware. And that's the way I feel best for me to achieve it, just seeing a lot of different occasions as an independent. A little bit about myself and the motive I come from to this problem is that my mother, she's a professor in the field of endocrinologists. For I think over 20 years, she has this dream of finding a solution to diabetes type 1, removing the need for buying the insulin. And I think if I find a solution to the ransomware problem, I'll have something to add to the Friday dinner table. Because right now it's basically her talking and all of us inspired. So maybe finding a solution to ransomware will be a little bit closer. I love Flare-On challenges. It starts tonight, so I hope to see everybody here in this challenge as well. And I'm a kite surfer. Okay, without further ado, today we're going to talk about ransomware, of course. I want to start with the motivation for the ransomware research, my personal motivation, you already know. Then I want to talk a little bit about ransomware concepts. So basically, my research here was clustering ransomware families into the encryption mechanisms they're trying to implement and trying to cluster them and find common usages in order to find an approach to maybe hooking the right functions to maybe find a solution, decryption solution that will fit all. That's the dream. After we're going to talk a little bit about that approach, I'm going to show a POC, a demonstration I've done on one of the ransomware. I have a couple of POCs on a couple of ransomware families, but we have only time for now, for one today. You can see my papers for the rest. And we'll talk a little bit about further research because there's a lot of research that can be done. Okay, so the motivation I think is pretty clear to this room at least. The market size, this is the protection market size, but it correlates with the graph that shows how much money was transferred via cryptocurrency. It's pretty much the same. Almost exponential. Even in the cryptocurrency transferring, it's even more clear. But throughout those years, ransomware attacks developed not only in terms of the profit they make, but they didn't develop technologically and also change a bit. And this is a disclaimer. We have data exfiltration, right? Double extortion, triple extortion, when they also call the CEO or blackmail key personnel. Now, in the past month, we've seen some reports, malterminal, prompt lock, all those ransomware that use AI. It's unclear to where this path is going. it's clear there's a lot of problems, and the ransomware is not going to fade in the next years. It has changed and it will change, but even though it has changed and it will change, the core concept of cryptographic locking is a consistent problem, right? For over 36 years, since 1989, the 8th Trojan ransomware that encrypted the file names and the folders and then asked for $189 via post mail, right? Until today, that we have ransomware as a service that goes to millions of dollars per attack and goes via cryptocurrency. They all have this methodology of core encryption, encrypting files, locking out the people that own the data. Even prompt locked and mal-terminal, the AI-generated ransomware that we've seen this last month, also had an implementation of crypto, of locking the files. So for me, that was the motivation to look specifically at the concept of the encryption. And I tried clustering all the ransomware families I researched, and we'll talk about them, into two main clusters of encryption mechanisms. But in order to understand them, I just want to clear the state of the art of how ransomware encryption methods look. As of today, they have to have a strong symmetric encryption, hopefully per file unique keys. Don't have to be, but hopefully. Why is that? Because symmetric encryption is way, way faster than asymmetric encryptions. And the core concept, a good ransomware product is a ransomware that can encrypt as many files as possible, as fast as possible. So there has to be this symmetric file encryption. We have to agree on a key, right? So usually there's an asymmetric encryption that encrypts the keys, because that's a whole different lecture. But ransomware operators, they see themselves as a business. They sometimes have customer support, PR. They see it as an involuntarily penetration test. They sometimes even hand out after the unvolunteered customers, paying customers pay, they even hand out a penetration test, some of the ransomware groups, a penetration test report to see how we got into your account. Sometimes it even has recommendations. So it's really important that for the PR of the ransomware families that they can decrypt the files, not just run away with the money, creating zombie customers. And when implementing this algorithm of symmetric encryption to encrypt the file, and then asymmetric to encrypt the symmetric keys, we get basically an algorithm that as responders, as researchers, we cannot, if done correctly, and with the right implementations of the right cryptography algorithms, we cannot decrypt the keys. We have to either trust on finding a cryptography vulnerability or a cryptographic usage vulnerability, because we have to either find the symmetric key or the asymmetric key, private key, which was never in the, is not supposed to be part of the incident. So looking at a couple of, not a couple, like a dozen of ransomware different families of the top ransomware, I found out that I could cluster the concept of encryptions into two distinct encryption mechanisms, which I named encryption mechanism 1 and very originally encryption mechanism 2. So the first one I'm going to talk about is the more sophisticated one, so stay with me. There's a hard-coded public key inside the binary in a way that the binary can use. Then the ransomware generates a random value. In a way, there are many ways to do it, but it has to generate a random value. From the random value, it derives a private key. From this private key, using elliptic curves algorithm, for example, ECDH, elliptic curve Diffie-Hellman, it can generate a corresponding public key. And using the threat actor's public key and the private key, the ransomware can generate a shared secret, and this shared secret will be the same shared secret that the ransomware operator, the threat actor, can then generate if he has that public key with his private key. So shared secret, which is using this key agreement protocol, which is the same for the ransomware, but can also be generated back at the ransom operator's home. And from that shared secret, the ransomware will derive symmetric key, either one or plenty per file, and encrypt the ransomware in that way. That's the encryption mechanism 1. Encryption mechanism 2 is more common, easier to understand. It's, again, a random generator value has to be generated. Then from this random generator, we derive a symmetric key. Okay? We use asymmetric encryption. Back in the previous mechanism, we used key agreement, shared secret agreement algorithms. Here we use asymmetric encryption, for example, RSA, to encrypt the symmetric key. Then we have this blob of encrypted symmetric key using the public key, the RSA public key. This is stored usually in a place called a encrypted file metadata. It's usually at the end of the encrypted file. It has a magic to mark this metadata. Then it has data that the ransomware operator, upon getting this file without any context, can decrypt the file. For example, it might have an identifier for the victim, and it has to have this public key with symmetric key corresponding. Maybe it also has the public key. It can have a lot of stuff, but this public key, a symmetric key encrypted with the public key, is data that the ransom operator has to have if he wants to be able to decrypt the symmetric key and then decrypt the file. So that's basically the main two, when trying to find common ground between ransom families in the encryption methods, that's the clusters I found. Here we can see a couple of ransomware clustered in them. So we have on one side, on the encryption mechanism 2, we have Akira. Akira is interesting. It uses a query performance counter, for example, and then a custom PRNG that they implemented themselves. Then this thing is, this blob is also encrypted with RSA, just like we saw in mechanism 2, and saved in the metadata. Medusa does it with rand and srand and the API functions. Then again, encrypts with RSA. Babuk v3 does it with cryptgen random. For example, in encryption, they all do those kinds of things. DarkSide, if I'm not mistaken, does it with a function that derives from a devu random, DarkSide Dragon Force. And encryption mechanism 1, that's the one we talked about. So Babuk v1 does it. We'll actually see it. We're going to see a POC on Babuk v1, which derives it using ECDH, agrees on the key, and then uses some cha-cha encryptions. We're going to see everything today. Ransomware Hen Night, coincidentally, do it very, very similarly to Babuk v1. And the fun fact is that back in 2021, Babuk v1 source code was leaked to GitHub. And, you know, people say that just like academic references can cite other works, so they cited the encryption algorithm of Babuk v1, because it's very similar, and the POC works with slight differences on all of them. A different example that I had to put here as a disclaimer is Bian Lian. Bian Lian, as a group, were the only ones from the ransomware I've seen that they couldn't cluster into those two mechanisms. The thing is, Bian Lian uses a hard-coded AES key and IV key in the sample. meaning it doesn't use asymmetric keys at all, neither PRNGs, but its mechanism is very, very weak, right? Because it's hard-coded. If the file was quarantined, if the file can be found, either network or any other way, then you have the keys inside and you can decrypt without paying. So I put this sample aside, but it was important to say that. Any ransomware variant that I've seen that has the asymmetric concept also has a PRNG concept, because he has to find a way to generate a key on the local machine. So my POC, my research was, my theory was that if I can reverse engineer malware samples, find their encryption protocol, and then if I would also be able to have all the data from the random generators together, I could always decrypt all the samples, right? Because that's all I need. I need the encryption method. I need the random generator or the private key of the ransomware operator, but I didn't want to research that part. I don't think it's feasible. But the pseudo-random generator happens on our machine, on the local victim machine. And it has to happen. So the research was, on the one hand, finding a way to get all those random generators values, and on the other hand, to reverse engineer the encryption models in order to later decrypt. And by that, generating a decryptor. So now we're going to see a quick POC example on a real ransomware, on Babuk V1, and a real infection. And if you want to see other POCs or to get in depth, so you're welcome to read the white paper. But now we're going to spend the next couple of minutes talking about Babuk V1. Babuk V1 is an interesting sample because, as I've mentioned, it was first observed in 2021. It is still observed. I had an occasion, a real case last year with Babuk. Following that year in 2021, the group's builder and the source code were leaked. So it's also a good incentive to try that sample, because it's easier to research it. The research will be way faster. And it, as I've mentioned, it is a core logic that other ransomware operators use. I've just seen yesterday this fascinating talk of a guy from Sophos talking about the EDR killers. And he also mentioned that he's seen in EDR killers that ransomware families all use like the same killers all the time. It's safe to say that ransomware, in addition to the fact that ransomware members jump from one group to another and groups change their names, it's also very, like, it's a strong assumption to assume that a source code that was leaked and is a really good ransomware would be of use for other ransomware. So that was also one of my incentives to show you this specific POC. In the newer versions, the framework was changed. I researched them as well. The other versions, the newer versions, use the encryption mechanism too, with encryption random. Very interesting research, but we will focus on Babuk V1. So some fun facts about Babuk V1. Not important for the POC, but just so you know, it's an unobfuscated ransomware. It has a lot of general techniques like the Windows Restart Manager that ransomware usually uses to kill processes that use files. It checks the list of hard-coded services, processes, regular check of processes with the create snapshot tool, and iterating files with find first file and next file. It has a multi-threading, which many ransomware has, because as we've said, a good KPI for ransomware is how fast it can encrypt all the files. But the multi-threading here is not that good. It's per drive. It's not the best multi-threaded ransomware can think of, with a classic folder iteration. And the interesting part is that it generates a random value using an API call to agree on a shared secret, and it derives the symmetric encryption key from there. Before I start, I have to say that another nice thing about Babuk is that it has a very interesting, very original encryption scheme in the per file encryption that with a lot of cryptography research, I'm pretty sure that the vulnerability can be found in the way the cryptographic works, but this was not intended for this research, maybe for the next research about Babuk. Now I will go over the algorithm. So the algorithm, the full encryption protocol, starts with the generation of a PRNG. That's not surprising, or else I wouldn't choose this sample. The PRNG used here is RTL gen random. This is a WinAPI function in adds API, as you can see. It's called system function 36, but it's actually RTL gen random. It gets a buffer to store the generated value in, and it gets a number. That's the special part about this API. You can pretty much generate values according to the size you want. Here they do 58 hexa, which is 88 bytes, and they store it in the buffer. The buffer is then divided into 4 different variables, 32, 12, 32, and 12. And for those who are familiar with Chacha, those are the exact number needed for Chacha, for the AES key and the nonce. Then it uses Chacha with a counter of 20, like in terms of the number of rounds to do. It uses key 1 and nonce 1 to encrypt the concatenation of key 2 and nonce 2. And then it uses the newly generated key 2 and nonce 2 from that encryption to encrypt key 1 and nonce 1. This is interesting. It didn't have to do it, but he did it. From that, it takes the first 72 bytes, meaning the new key 1, the new nonce 1, and the 28 bytes out of the new key 2. It concatenates them, and those 72 bytes are the private key. It then uses the ECDH to generate a public key, which is 144 bytes, twice as the private key. And it saves this into the app data, because as we said, we want it to get the threat actor, the ransom operator, has to get this public key when he wants to decrypt. He has to get it, because with that public key and his private key, he will generate the shared key, and then he can decrypt data for his paying customers. I love this phrase, paying customers for ransomware victims. Side note. Then in terms of encryption protocol, from the shared secret, it generates 2 keys using SHA. The first one is SHA on the first 72 bytes. The second one is SHA on the 144, and it uses 1 nonce for both. This is not the best encryption protocol I've ever seen, but that's what it does. And using those, it divides it into small files and big files. Small files less than 40 megabytes. It Chacha XORs it once with the first key and the nonce, and the second time on the result of this encryption, it encrypts using the second key and the nonce. So that's pretty much it in terms of the encryption for small files. And for big files, which are more than 40 megabytes, it divides the files into 3 chunks, takes 10 megabytes of each, meaning encrypts 3 chunks of 10 megabytes each, pretty much equally divided into 3 parts of the file. And that's, depending on how strong the encryption is or not, we can talk about it, and if maybe it would have been better to classify into file types, but that's what he did. And the fact is that it means that at most, 40 megabytes will be encrypted for each file. And this is pretty good in terms of performance, not specifically good in terms of the outcome of the encrypted file, but in terms of performance, it's okay. Then for the POC, I used the Minhook open source library to basically just hook API calls to get a file with the random generated bytes of the system function 36. From that, I check only the results of the 88 bytes that has exactly 88 bytes. Shouldn't be a lot, only one, but if there are a couple, we can brute force. And we save that value itself into a different file. Then the POC is pretty straightforward. We mimic everything that the ransomware did. We read the 144 bytes from the RTL generated. It's supposed to be 88, sorry. And then we take only the first 88 bytes and we divide them to 4. Then we do the encryption, decryption exactly as is. Please mind that usually when we want to decrypt, we do the opposite, right? So for example, when we want to decrypt, we'll do first the decryption with the key 2 and then key 1 because we want to reverse it. But here we don't want to reverse, we just want to restore the same value, so we do not reverse it. We do exactly as is. So it's SHA-20 on key 2, SHA-20 on key 1, and then we have the shared secret. Using the shared secret, we do SHA with the 72, and then SHA on all of the key, the 144, and we take the first 12 bytes of the shared secret. Then we do we reverse it. First the decryption on key 2, and then on key 1. And as you see, we get the private key, the shared key, and the decryption. This is a real example. I infected my own virtual machine with the real sample from VX Underground. And I took the first file I saw, which was alias, and I used this algorithm, and you can see in the preview that it worked. This is the expected value. Disclaimers, because I have only a few minutes left. So full work is in the white paper. In the POC, it's a user mode hooker, not a kernel mode for now. And this solution, because of that, cannot scale for a production solution. And additional research might explore broader solution. My mission is I call it the 10 out of 10, because I showed you 9 out of 10, the ransomware families that go into, that this solution works for, meaning both mechanism 1 and mechanism 2. But what about those ransomware which are actually less sophisticated? And in terms of further research that I would like to do, so kernel mode hooking, I think it can give an extra performance value and maybe even make something real out of it, not just a POC. Safe value storing, we don't want the ransomware attacker to also encrypt our data, so we need to think of safe value storing, a broader solution to all kinds of encryption, and looking forward to future cryptographic encryptions. And my conclusion is that at the end we have to catch them all, right? All the ransomwares. That's it. Those are the references. You can look at it, and thank you so much for listening.